Yo, yo, it's MiniTV here coming at you again with another video. Today we're doing something different. We've got the new patch that just dropped the other day, and I've been playing it, I've been thinking a lot about it, and I wanted to make a video about the real hard implications of the patch itself. There's been a few videos out on YouTube already, having kind of first reactions and just kind of stating the obvious, but I've really delved deep, thought about every different change and how that was going to impact your gameplay and my gameplay. And I think if we think about this patch and adapt to it, we can tailor our approach to our games and eventually win MMR, which is the whole point why we're here. So without further ado, guys, let's jump into it. So to start off with, denies no longer granting gold. I think this is actually something that's really important to note, because this change here, along with a few others about the laning stage, is that lanes no longer will be as stompy as before. So for example, if you're losing a lane, you're losing it hard, you can get absolutely destroyed because you can get every creep denied. You'll make sure you'll get every creep hit last hit as well. Whereas now denies no longer granting gold. It was about 6 gold for melee creeps and about 9 or 10 for even 11 or 12, I think, actually, for range creeps as well. So there's less gold from that respect given. So if you're in a losing lane, it won't be as bad, particularly not with the deny XP given to enemy heroes increased from 40 to 50 as well. It's something like a 20% increase, because obviously 10% of 40 is 4, and then 48. So around that. So denies in general, kind of as a result of this, have been kind of put down. Really, they're not really as strong as before, and as a result, because of that, what's probably more important now is going to be actually getting rid of all the experience, or getting rid of their own lane creeps and neutral creeps in its entirety. So there was a game from OG versus Alliance, game 1 yesterday, and it was a tri lane actually. They had Morphlin, Grimstroke, and Void Spirit in the off lane, tri lane against a Bat. And it was really interesting because what they did, instead of having just Morphlin deny every single creep, they actually boxed out the Bat Rider so that he couldn't be in experience range to start with. And I think, and this was obviously played on the patch that hit yesterday, and this is really important because obviously giving half experience now, even if they are denied, is actually quite a lot, if you think about it. I mean, before deny XP, I think was like 25%, and now it's sort of 50%, obviously, from 40 to 50 here. So I think tri lanes could definitely be coming back into the meta, in the sense that, because if you run a tri lane, you can kind of box the offlaner out completely out of experience range, which really will then hurt them completely. Not only that, but I think with denies obviously not being as powerful or as potent, pulling is going to be even more important, because obviously when you pull a creep wave into one of the neutrals, it completely denies it if obviously the enemy is out of range. So pulling is, in a sense, has been even more potent and stronger because of it, whether you're in the safe lane or in the off lane. Pulling in general is definitely so much stronger, so definitely keep that in mind. And also, obviously, a small thing as well, but there's some heroes that are really good at denying. So, say like LC, with his passive, whenever you get hit, your moment of courage can proc on denies. But now it's been slightly less impactful. Denying isn't good. So, small things, but I wanted to mention every kind of implication that this patch can have. So the melee creeps and neutral creeps. So base bounty increased by 5 and neutral base bounty back to 10%. So first off, with the base bounty from +5 to melee creeps, it's about 17% increase from melee creeps. Before it was about 29 gold you were getting per melee creep. Now it's obviously 36. So around 17% increase. This is really important actually, because normally the discrepancy between melee and range creeps was very significant. It still is significant. Obviously, range creeps give more gold and experience, whereas now melee are just sort of slightly better. Now, I think this definitely was to help that denies no longer grant gold, because if you're a carry and you were getting gold from denies as well, which was important, just to kind of get your items on time quicker. But kind of the implication of this, and particularly this one, is that hard carries are just generally better, particularly the ones that build Battle Fury, that can clear creep waves as well as neutral camps fast. But also, from the early laning stage, where you're able to push out a wave, then go into the jungle earlier. So heroes like Troll, for example, that can push out a wave with the whirling axes, going to the jungle and farm that, and then go back to lane as well. Obviously, heroes like Anti-Mage that be building Battle Fury keeps on going as well. Not only that as well, but this further cements the kind of basic idea that lane creeps are more important than neutral creep as well. Although neutral base bounties have been increased by 10%, we talked about how melee base bounty has been increased by about 16 to 17% in general. So lane creeps, so in the mid game, for example, you were running to a lane and there's a big creep wave there, but you also want to farm neutral camps in between. Whereas now, really, the creep wave is just far more important. If there's a creep wave to be farming it, you need to be farming that over neutral creeps as well. Not only that, but for the neutral creep base bounty fact in itself, stacking is even more valuable. It's been valuable for a while now, obviously, with the supports getting gold from when the stacks have been farmed. But with a 10% increase to neutral base bounty values, stacking is so much more important now, because not only does your carry get more gold, but also the supports will be receiving more gold because of the stacks they made in general. So, in just altogether, hard carries better, Battle Fury especially, and make sure you're stacking and pulling as well. Really, really important, guys. So all talents are now 20% weaker. So this one is kind of important, and probably not a lot of people realize this, but obviously there's a lot of heroes in the game that have talents that are not stats or percentage based, that are either on or off, and those talents haven't been changed. And the ones that haven't been changed by this 20% nerf back across the board have in a sense been buffed because everything around them has been nerfed. So heroes like Shadow Demon at level 10, the Soul Catcher creates illusion on death. That's exactly the same, whereas obviously the cast range used to be 100, now it's 75. Other ones like Shadow Fiend, obviously the presence aura effects building, the 2+ damage per soul, all this exactly the same as it was before. So that's an important thing to note. Not only that, when it comes to talents as well, but think about heroes that whose talent pools were already kind of poor, but his natural base skills were always good, and that kind of what made the hero itself. So if the hero was already good, without talents, now they've become even better because everyone else's talents that might have been strong are now like weaker. So in my opinion, my favorite hero, Anti-Mage, his talents actually weren't particularly that good. It's just really his kind of his skill set and his kind of stat gain in general is what made him good. So for level 10, for example, used to be 13 strength, now it's 10. Used to be 20 attacks, but now it's 15. Not really that much of a drop down. Whereas we compare it to heroes that had great talents, let's say perhaps PL, for example. Level 10 talent used to be 20% evasion, now it's 16. You see how the jump is bigger. So, if you have more, this 20% is more impactful. Whereas if you have less, the 20% doesn't mean as much because it's a less of a value drop in that respect. So thinking about heroes that are kind of have weak talents but are strong heroes to pick in the meta in general, those are the ones that are really going to start popping off. And obviously the heroes that have talents that are either on or off in general, but not stats or percentage. Important thing to remember. So towers now granting HP regen for 2/1 towers and +3 for 2, 3, and 4 towers. So the first obvious implication for this is that towers are going to be kind of harder to destroy and easier to defend because you get the regen. Obviously, you used to get armor as well, but now you get regen as well. So defending towers at all levels is a lot easier, which will then obviously slow the game down, giving more time for hard carries. I think this patch in general is definitely a lot more favoured to carries in general, because it's delaying the game throughout, whether it's through the increased amount of gold bounty they'll be getting, the laning stage not as impactful, particularly when it comes to denies, really helping. Another thing when it comes to towers as well that is kind of a little bit underlooked and underappreciated is that now pulling, particularly in the safe lane, is even more impactful, because before, normally you'd always want, if a hard carry was struggling to CS, he'd want the support to pull, so he's able to CS under tower, because it gave obviously armor and it was a better of a position for him to CS. Whereas now he wants to do that even more because of the HP regen now as well. So if you're in the safe lane, making sure that your supports are pulling is really, really important. Obviously, you can have the same effect in the off lane as well, making sure you're doing the hard camp pull. Really key. I mean, just in general, I think the safe lanes have been buffed because of this, because normally first off, the creep wave starts near the tower from the safe lane anyway, so they have that inherent advantage. But not only that as well, it's really important, just to realize now that pulling is really, really key, and keep that in mind. Same goes for perhaps defending tier 2s as well, or sort of CSing it near tier 2s. I remember there was an example actually in the OG versus Alliance game as well, where Seb was playing Enigma, I think maybe game 1 or game 2. He was playing Radiant. He was trying to get the bounty rune near the tier 2, the Radiant side. Took a lot of damage, but instead of running back to base, he just stood at the tier 2 and regened up almost all the way to HP because of this +3 regen from tier 2 towers. So small things like that are really important to keep in mind. So the XP change, numbers there, you can really read them. But overall, it's about sort of 600, 650 experience more, just from 9 to 13, because it's about 100 per level, and there's 5 changes or so. So quite a big change, actually. So what does this mean? So obviously, tempo controllers and heroes that really rely on levels, particularly in that 9 to 13 stage, have been nerfed in general, because it's harder to get to those levels. The kind of snowball effect is harder to reach, where you're not just kind of snowballing through levels, getting all these power kind of spikes in levels and spells, is harder to reach. But more impactfully, I think personally, is coming from supports that normally would maybe perhaps play greedy, in the sense of maybe picking up a skill point in one of his lesser out of his 3 skills. That is maybe a value point, even though his Q and W are really, really important. So, for example, let me explain this. Bane, for example. So normally when you're playing a hero like Bane, obviously your most important 2 spells are your Brain Sap and your Nightmare, for obvious reasons. However, that kind of value point in Enfeeble at level 2, for example, is actually really impactful, really useful. Obviously 4% magic resist reduction and the 15% status reduction is really nice in combination of Brain Sap. However, because you're getting level 9 and 10 and 11 later, it's harder to max out your 2 impactful spells, your Nightmare and your Brain Sap, while still having a point in Enfeeble. So, and I saw this again from the OG Alliance match where FNG was playing Bane. I remember I've been watching a lot of his replays. Normally he'd get an early point in Enfeeble because it's kind of value, it's useful for all his spells later on. But instead he ended up just maxing Nightmare and Brain Sap. Obviously you need the high points in Nightmare for the cast range and the duration. Obviously Brain Sap is obvious. But with this change, obviously, before you obviously would be able to max out a point in Enfeeble at level 11, right? So because obviously you'd have 4 from Brain Sap, 4 from Nightmare, that's level 8. Level 9 would be Fiend's Grip, level 10 would be your Talent Tree, and then you'd get a point in your tertiary spell in Enfeeble. But because you're getting level 11 so much later, you can't skip a point from Nightmare, for example, to get a point in Enfeeble, because you need the cast range to set up kills, to defend allies, etc., etc., etc. So I think this actually is quite an impactful change, particularly to supports that kind of want to have a point in everything while still maxing out 2 spells, because you're getting level 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, etc. later. And for supports that really struggle, particularly position 5 heroes that most likely won't get the book, I think this actually has an impact on how you're going to be speccing in your level trees, your actual regular spells. So that's an important to note. I only made an example of Bane because I know that hero quite well, but I think there's a few other heroes like that as well. So keep that in mind, of what the implications of what this patch is actually doing for you. So, Reliable Gold is now only giving for passive income. Before, Reliable Gold was from kills, Roshan and towers, and Reliable Gold is gold that you cannot lose upon dying. Now, however, basically all gold will be lost upon dying, except for obviously the passive tick income. So what does this mean? So first off, the important trick that was kind of always important regardless of what patch, but now so even more important, is making sure you buy before you die. So having obviously quick buy enabled and make sure you're using it is really important. And just before you die, you spam that key and buy whatever you can before you die. Obviously, if you don't need to save for buyback, for example, that's important because if you've just killed a hero or you've just killed a tower, like before it was bad if you didn't, but now it's even worse if you don't. So it's really very punishing if you don't do this. So make sure you're buying before you die. Really, really key to do that. Also, buybacks now are harder for carries or more expensive for carries because you're going to have less reliable gold to kind of take or dip into when it comes to using buybacks. Interesting enough, though, it's still useful and still good for supports because obviously a lot of gold you'll be getting will come from passive tick anyway, and that obviously won't be affected by dying, which you'll most likely be dying a lot as a support. So, I mean, it's really important. You see it more so in competitive, but it can still be useful in pubs. Definitely important in pubs, in the sense that, say, if you're a position 5, you have a key ultimate, let's say Bane again, for example, and you die without getting your ultimate off. You just want to buy back, use it, and change a team fight completely. So it's a lot easier almost for supports now because your reliable gold is given for passive income, which a lot of the gold you'll be getting, it will be from passive income, unlike carries where 95% of gold will be coming from creeps and other things, etc. Not only that as well, but items such as Philosopher's Stone is also been buffed, and Bounty Hunter as well, because those are reliable gold. And it still it's still reliable even though you've sort of stolen it all from thingy. Another important thing as well, actually, is that before, particularly in mid, you'd sometimes see it where there was a slight advantage to one mid and they'd end up killing the enemy mid, but then dying afterwards. That, in a sense, has been kind of made worse because obviously the gold you get from killing the person, and then if you immediately die afterwards, will then be lost if you don't buy anything in between that, which can be quite difficult if you're focusing on getting the kill and you die immediately after, say, a tower hit or from a whatever. So before, it would be good because you'd get the experience and you'd be getting reliable gold from the kill, whereas now you only get the experience from killing them. Alternatively, the person who then died and then, say, got the kill from the tower that killed the enemy hero that killed you would now be almost better in a sense because you'd die, but then you'd get you would get gold from killing after you die, so you wouldn't have lost the gold you just got, if that makes sense. So in that sense, that I think that will have an impact in somewhat in terms of diving in general. I mean, diving in general in this patch has been kind of nerfed in a sense because of the regen auras and things like that, and obviously the towers doing more damage in general. So diving has been kind of nerfed in that sense of playing more defensive is something to keep in mind and keep ahead. So AoE gold increased by a little bit. This one I think is probably a little bit needed, but it's probably not as impactful. I mean, it's only by what 0.006 0.006 in terms of net worth, but it's better in the sense that AoE gold, so killing people in a group, is a little bit better, but also it has an impact of killing the higher net worth heroes, so like carries and mids. Before, they were trying to kind of incentivizing killing the carries and the mids by kill streaks, but then that got nerfed. Obviously, the kill streak bounty had been nerfed, whereas now it's back to kind of a more previous formula of where it was to do with their net worth and how much gold they were giving per kill from gold. So killing heroes like together, small packs like smoke ganks of 2 or 3, killing mids and carries is more it's better, just flat out better because they give more net worth now or more gold from their net worth. The neutral item drop changes. So tier 1 and tier 5 are exactly the same. So 7 tier 1 but then there's a 2 minute increase from the tier 2 the tier 3, but a decrease of 3 minutes from the tier 4. So in terms of implications, I think in general this is kind of a good change, because I think tier 2 and the tier 1 items are too close together. You didn't sometimes you'd be getting tier 1 and tier 2 at the same time because you had no chance to farm the jungle, which in some ways is a slight buff to heroes that struggle to kill jungle creeps, because before, obviously at 15 minutes, if you hadn't hard farmed all your tier 1 items, you're kind of missing out on those items, whereas now you get an extra 2 minutes to farm the tier 1 items to then go ahead and farm the tier 2. So a slight buff in that respect to heroes that don't farm jungle particularly effectively. But I think this is another point back to stacking, because I feel like ancients give more chance of dropping these items, and I think so if we look at the tier 2 items, they're so useful and so impactful. Aquila, Essence Ring, Van Brace, a lot of these items are very good. Never Sure in the right hands, Dragon Scale against minus armor heroes. Like so many good items, and it's really important that you get them as soon as possible. Before you was getting at 50 minutes, now you're getting 2 minutes later. So stacking Ancients and having a hero that can farm Ancients, particularly Battle Fury carries or heroes like Sven, for example, can clear them out instantly, and you can drop all your tier items at 17 minutes if you have stacks ready for them to farm at 17 minutes, for example, and that will be that kind of boost in value and kind of strength in general for your team. And not only that, but the tier 4 items dropping 3 minutes earlier is actually really, again, quite important as well. Tier 4 items are some of the best items really in the game. Illusionist Cape obviously is fantastic. Witless Shaco really useful. Thomas Relic, so many great items, and they're dropping 3 minutes earlier now as well. So I feel that if you get like a hero like Chaos Knight that's been kind of surging in popularity with an Illusionist Cape, that hero can basically take over the game with that one item. And making sure you farm them at 37 minutes on the dot can really make a difference between taking Roshan, taking team fights, and really making sure that you keep in mind that these items are happening earlier, particularly the tier 3, and that can really make a difference in how team fights and the games in general are swayed one way or the other. Tier 2 health increased by 500 and damage by 25. I don't know why they didn't put it up with the other tower changes, but regardless, obviously now the implications are tier 2s are just harder to kill, and if they're harder to kill, they're easier to defend. I think this is becoming a trend, particularly in higher tier pubs, where if say a team got Roshan, the team that didn't have Roshan were just giving up all outer towers and only defending high ground. Whereas now tier 2 towers in general are defendable and they're easier to defend. You have obviously the regen, the armor. Now they're harder to take down. They do more damage, for example. You can defend tier 2 towers, which is quite nice actually, because before it was like everything outside of the base is just let it just die basically, whereas now you can look to mount sieges and defenses, for example, which I think is quite nice. So overall, I think for the general changes, I think in like on a blanket statement, I think carries and hard carries are more viable now. I remember the past patch, I was literally only playing kind of off laners in the safe lane, heroes like Necrophos or very mid game carries like Dragon Knight, having great success because the games I was going high ground and taking racks at like 20 minutes and just destroying it. Whereas now the game set and pace is slower thanks to towers being harder to be taken, XP and levels being reduced in general, and creep gold, particularly for heroes that want to farm creeps like Anti-Mage, for example. Are better. But not only that, I feel that the death ball kind of meta has been slightly nerfed, and split push actually over the last few patches has been getting better. If you think about this, split push before was very difficult to do because you had things like boots of travel that would give you 2 different TP slots, so it was a lot easier to defend. Movement speed has now been taken off from stats as well, so people moving across to the other side of the map, which they didn't really want to, now takes even longer to do. So heroes that do split push, that have innate mobility, heroes like Anti-Mage, heroes like Nature's Prophet, for example, are all better because of that. Not only that, but even though the towers are harder to kill, this, in my mind, makes it harder for Deathball to achieve them for split push, because on split push normally it's one hero, particularly perhaps anti-mage. So if anti-mage is being kind of set back, say 10%, let's just say these arbitrary numbers, that's bad obviously for anti-mage. But if there's a death ball of 5 heroes being set back by 10%, that's overall worse for that team, because normally it was only anti-mage that's been 10%. Now it's the whole team, or the whole enemy team that was death balling. That's 50%. So obviously these numbers are a bit kind of thrown out there and stuff, but in the general idea and the general principle is the same. Not only that, but a team that's split pushing will normally have 3 or 4 heroes defending the death pool push versus the one person split pushing. And now defending towers is easier. The death pool doesn't really want to defend towers; they want to be taking towers. So heroes or teams that are kind of split pushing, that have the defense of 4 heroes like Jakiro, Grimstroke, that can kind of push out waves. They now have HP regen, and their towers are stronger, so they can better defend those heroes. So because of that, I feel that split push is slowly coming back into the meta. Same goes for tri-lane metas as well, because you want to get rid of complete experience from the enemy offlaner, because denies are no longer impactful or as much as impactful. So maybe we'll have more, perhaps not tri-lanes, but maybe 2-1, 2-1-1 with a Roma, because kills are a bit better now with the net worth, but also lanes aren't as impactful, because before it was 2-1-2, because lanes were so impactful. You had to have focus on the lanes, whereas now if a lane's getting denied, the person who's denying it, and obviously the stronger lane, doesn't get as much gold, doesn't reduce as much experience to the person getting denied either. So I feel this is a really nice change in general, the way Dota is going. It allows all heroes and roles to really kind of hit their peaks. Before, the carries weren't able to really hit their peaks, they were just kind of losing out from it. And heroes like tower defenders are a bit better now. Ogre, Lich, and Treant Protect, for example, kind of delaying the game, I think in general is all a lot better. And I think I really like that style of where Dota is going to. So item changes, healing salve, 2 seconds, not much change really, just maybe you might miss a CS or 2 if you're salving in the lane. A slight nerf to the shovel as well. Gloves of haste and blades of attack, I think this is a needed change as well. Before, treads were kind of arguably the best boots for carries in general, because of the gold cost and other things, whereas now that kind of gap has been shortened, even though blades of attack has been increased by 20. Remember, face boots actually were the only boots that gave percentage from the active. Treads never did. And I think as a result, face boots are slightly better than they were before. Not saying they're better than treads, but they're slightly better. So maybe it's a more of a you have to choose which one is better overall. Ring of Bassi increased by 25. A little bit of a nerf as well. All these aura items, you might not see it as much from starting items from supports. Before, I was buying it on supports that could use mana, and then having just sort of set of tangos. Now that could be reduced less so. And Hood of Defiance. Hood of Defiance, I think, is still really good, but Pipe has now been nerfed even more because it's 200 gold, more expensive because you have to have the Hood. Hood is still really good though. It still gives the only magic resist outside of braces, because stats or strength does not give magic resistance. That is the end of the patch analysis, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, was able to learn from it. But make sure, guys, just really keep in mind the implications of these changes. From a sort of standpoint of, say, like Darwin, obviously it's survival of the fittest, and that doesn't necessarily mean the strongest or the most fit, but it's actually talking about who is most fit and suited to the environment they're in. So we've got to change and adapt our playstyle to make sure that we're in the right environment, to really make sure we're winning, getting them MMR, and being better players in general. So that's it from me, guys. Other than that, keep biting and grinding. See you in the next video. Peace.